Josh, welcome to episode 8. How you doing?
I feel like I've got to give some sort of special answer to that. So I'm very hot.
You are hot, but are you temperature-wise hot or?
Temperature-wise, very hot in my office. I've got sort of obviously mixed emotions today with everything that's going on in the world. It all feels heavy and overwhelming, I guess, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Actually, I rolled into how you're doing, but I want to ask, how are you feeling?
How am I feeling? Yeah, I'm feeling mixed. I feel a real mixed bag of emotions. I feel like the world is at some sort of like pivotal moment. When you look around and see everything that's going on at the moment, I feel like there's something happening. I don't know if that kind of summarizes very well how I feel, but I feel like it's difficult to describe how I feel at the moment.
I think I can definitely like empathize. It resonates. It's definitely a feeling of heaviness. You know, obviously what's going on in the world, what's going on with the protests in the States, the impact, that on top of, still uncertainty of, of what's going on with COVID, the exposure of what's going on in terms of prejudice, privilege, racism, and it's been really surfaced and it's confronting. And obviously, I wrote a piece at the weekend that sort of instigated a lot of conversations for me personally, but it's kind of made me reflect a lot. So yeah, I think mixed is probably the way to explain how I'm feeling at the moment as well.
Yeah.
As we sit here on Wednesday afternoon here in the UK, what are your reflections on the last 7 days?
Well, I guess that's a massive question, isn't it? My reflection on the last 7 days. Well, firstly, when what happened, it was obviously, because it has to be shared across socials, right? But then when you see it, it's very hard viewing.
Let's just say it. What happened was George Floyd was murdered, and it was caught.
Why do you think I'm avoiding saying it?
Seeing
George Floyd brutally murdered in the way that he was, and for it to be caught on camera in the way that it was awful. And the outrage that has followed, I've learned so much, by the way. I've learned so much in the last week about my privilege, about how racism plays out and I thought I was clued up, and I've learned that I'm not in the last week. I've learned that I'm not at all. And so I think there's huge benefit that's going to come out of the conversations that are being had and the platform that it's created. And on top of all that, there's a sense in me of like real, and I'm just talking from my own personal experience because, that's where we're at the moment. That's like, I'm very fearful and nervous and frightened around the whole situation of even having an input on it.
Which is obviously, part of the narrative of what I wrote, which was feeling like, what can I contribute? What should I contribute? What can I add? And I think even as a person of color, where do I sit in all of this? As an Asian man, what's my perspective? How do I contribute? So But I realized that a lot of that was my own fear and my own worry about perception, and it's more important than that. You know, you and I both have an opinion. We're not shy to kind of say what's on our mind. We have a community, we have a network. It's a travesty if we don't do anything about it. It's a travesty if we don't use that for good. And it's not that we'll be able to do things by ourselves. We have to kind of join in. We have to kind of work with other people. But a part of that is exposing our ignorance, and some of it is stuff we didn't know we didn't know. But if we're really honest, there's probably a lot of stuff that we know we didn't know. It's all out there. You know, it's definitely a topic that is becoming that has been becoming more and more prevalent. There are more, books on the subject matter. I know people that talk about it, and I stayed at the fringes of it with respect and supported, but I didn't really, really, truly dive into it. And I think that's what's kind of exposing for a lot of people, is to know that it's out there.
Yeah, and I learned that was a big learning for me yesterday, in how easy it is for me to turn the cheek, right, and to just, it doesn't affect me, so like I don't have to worry about it. And I think I found the Blackout Tuesday online. I found that really powerful yesterday from my standpoint. I became a little bit confusing by the end of the day across social media, by the way, because initially it was sort of everybody was doing it, and then there was like a big rise in towards the back end of the day of everyone saying you shouldn't do it. But I found it quite powerful. In one of the self-reflections that I had was that I found myself doing it on Instagram, and then thinking, well, I can just post as normal on LinkedIn, right? And I did have that feeling, and then I kind of realized that, wow, even when it's right in front of my face and being really pushed strongly, there was still a big part of me that wanted to turn the cheek and just claim ignorance, just post on LinkedIn. And I know, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? Posting on LinkedIn when we're supposed to be doing a day of not doing that and listening and learning. So, when I recognized that part of me still existed, even in that small happening, I recognized it gave me a big learning of how big a I don't know, thing this is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about Blackout Tuesday because I think for exact reasons you mentioned, in the beginning, at the beginning of the day, you said there was, you saw a lot of it. It seemed to kind of be more prevalent on Instagram, in terms of all the visual platforms, right? So I'd say Instagram, then there's Facebook, and then LinkedIn are the ones that I use, and I know there's a load that my kids use, and that I have no idea, right? But and so I saw it, and my first reaction was, actually, I don't feel like I want to participate, right? Because I feel like it's, my first reaction was, I feel like it's the message isn't clear about what it is. And then I had a couple of conversations with various people, and sort of similar thing. But then as I reflected on it, and at the end of the day, I did participate. And the reason I participated was because it shows, it's a demonstration of solidarity. It's a demonstration of a community. It's a demonstration of power. That it's a demonstration of taking back something that seemingly is owned and managed by kind of algorithms and systems, right? And so I thought that was the reason. And then obviously there's a lot of commentary, rightly, that says, well, this, privilege, racism, institutional racism are structures. They are big, long structures that that cannot be undone by this gesture. And I think the key for me, and this is just my decision making, was that participating in that for me wasn't about this is going to change it. It's just saying that we want to be showing that there's people together, and this is a moment. This is a moment like to show that solidarity. But I can really understand the views on the other side, and part of the challenges was that actually in doing that you were blacking out information for protesters about the protests, and so you were blacking out media.
Yeah, the important information became hard to be found. So on Instagram, they did a get around on that, right? Didn't they? So a lot of people in the morning were saying, "Don't hashtag Black Lives Matter, hashtag Blackout Tuesday," because you're clogging up the Black Lives Matter feed, right? So don't hashtag Black Lives Matter. Leave that for the information space, and then
but that's just
Tuesday.
but that's just one channel. Like I think the point is it almost stopped people communicating about the things because they were sort of staying away. And then I think the other so that was my reasons for kind of joining in. But I did deliberate. The other thing that I really wanted to ask you about is brands using this as a way to push their virtue.
Yeah. Well, I see some of that. Well, I see some of that. I see. So one of the things that I started to feel a little bit uncomfortable was, and I perhaps question if I can be guilty of this, was, I don't know how to say this, white people trying to construct the post that Black people would like the most.
Okay.
Right? Have I made sense with that?
I don't. I think I understand the concept, but just say a bit more.
Just there was some posts that I was reading, and I was thinking, it's great that you've written that, and I guess it's a bit like if you've posted the black square on Instagram. If you're just posting that, you may as well not bother, right? What are you actually doing about it? And to kind of just bring it back to that part a moment, because it kind of feeds into what I'm saying here. I posted it, and then I saw the things about taking it down. And I thought, well, you know what? Like, I have spent today reflecting and reading lots of the stuff that had been posted and trying to educate myself. And I know that I make the best effort that I can at the I try, right? So I'm involved in trying to be part of the change. So I kind of justified that. I do just think that there's like virtue signaling is massive on social media, right? So rather than actually writing a post that is a reflection of what you're thinking and feeling, I think a lot of people write posts that they think are going to gain momentum and that are going to be liked the most, right? So that's slightly different to having a vulnerable self-reflection of what you're thinking and feeling in this very moment. Have I made sense there?
Yeah.
Right. And then the second thing that I saw was some organizations, some companies on LinkedIn that did a big sort of post about and made it all about their company.
Yeah.
And said, as a result, like this, I don't know, like it's different when it's somebody like Nike who have got a massive platform, who were, Nike did the for once just do it, for once just don't do it. And then did you see that Adidas retweeted that? And there was this big thing about the two brands sort of coming together. So I thought there was some power in that.
There is, and there is. I don't know enough about it, so I'm not gonna, misrepresent. But there are some people that look at the way that Nike treat certain sports stars, and don't think it truly reflects what so what they've said doesn't necessarily really reflect kind of the truth behind the scenes, right? So some people have pointed to their lack of diversity on the board, right? Some people have pointed to some specific incidents with sports stars who have spoken out about certain things, and they've been sponsored and they've been dropped and things like that. So
okay, well then,
yeah.
then
So
that
I guess
context changes that as
I
well.
guess the thing is, no company that I'm aware of, and I'm sure there are plenty that are trying really hard. No company has really got this right yet, because
No.
society hasn't got it right. But I think they've always been able to communicate quickly and in a resonant way in these moments. And I think that's good. What I didn't like was, those posts about this is who we are and this is why we've always been like this. And actually it was just a lack of care. And you could tell it's just some fairly, low level thinking that's thought, well, we better get something out. And so they did. And actually even the notion of taking what was supposed to be just a blackout, right? And then putting text through it, white text through it, it's like, you're missing the point. You're not supposed to be communicating.
Yeah.
Right. And actually, if you want to say a few words underneath, fine. But then these are the companies that just haven't had an opinion on any of this stuff beforehand.
Listen,
and I'm curious to see what happens next.
Exactly. And listen, I saw one company on LinkedIn that opened with the line that while racism exists, we can't do the work that we want to do. Which I've actually probably worded it better than what it was worded on the post, by the way.
Yeah.
Right. I showed you the post, and I'm not in the game of calling people out and shaming them, but the post was all about the company, but just sort of caveated around what's going on at the moment. And sort of, for me, that epitomized the, if you're not going to talk about the actual situation, then just don't say anything at all. Don't do this big post about your company and just sort of caveating yourself into it. I don't know. There was some stuff online that left a poor taste in my mouth. And I'm probably, I also say that with the awareness that, I've probably played into that kind of stuff myself, right? So any reflections that I make at the moment, I guess it's just, this is my nervous part of me that's just saying, I want to also be aware that I'm not sitting on a rooftop here and going, I've got my shit sorted out and I'm digging out everyone that doesn't. Does that make sense?
I think honestly, I genuinely do. I'm not just saying this because it's you, but I think there's a genuine difference between somebody who speaks a lot about personal development, growth, the learnings from their life, as you have, where you went wrong, how you've tried to rectify, and being responsive. You talk a lot about mental health. You talk a lot about kind of people that are going through, things in their lives. And some of that was responding yesterday. There's a part of you that didn't want to stop communicating. It wasn't that you were selling your business or anything like that. You were just trying to communicate your reflections. I think that's different to, big brands thinking, oh, well, we better not be seen not to be doing anything right now, and then business as usual tomorrow. So I think, as I've talked about in the previous podcast, where we talk about mental health Awareness Week, what happens on day +1? So what's happening from today onwards? What's happening in a week's time? What's happening in 3 weeks' time? What's happening in 6 months' time? Are you still as passionate? And I would encourage people to take note of what companies have said and publicly call them out in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, and ask them to show what they've done differently. Like, it's not, and it's not good enough to have a manifesto and say this is what we want to do and this is a 5-year strategic plan. You've got to get into action. You have to do stuff from today. There's always been lots of talk. That's the problem, and not enough action. So I think that's what needs to happen. And I did a lot of reflection. I sort of, like, last week I was, I've documented it in my post, but I was just really struggling with how to get involved.
Mm.
what to say. And then what's happened is that I was really grumpy and not very present with my family all weekend until I was able to kind of articulate what I was feeling. And then what's really important is I made a bunch of commitments at the end of that post, and I've started putting that into action. So
Mm.
I've called out the people, I've called into the people that I know have influence and can make a difference. I've told them, I've been really explicit, I'm going to be looking to bring them on board. I want to look at how we can communicate a message around privilege, and I want to talk to you about that in a second. And so if each of us kind of do things differently and we take a bit of action, then I do believe in the ripple effect. It's going to take a long time. There are lots of, reasons why lots of things will never change.
Mm.
But we need to, we need to try it. And it can't be just the oppressed, the people who have been oppressed, who are fighting, who've been fighting this cause for, decades, hundreds, thousands of years, right? Like, it's just not thousands, but that's what we need to do is to do something differently now.
Yeah, and the action piece that you talk about, and making commitments to creating change for that. And we've talked about this before, by the way. Not too long ago on this podcast, we've been trying to bring the conversation to the forefront as well. So I've always been, no, not always, more recently in my life, I've been very keen to be part of the solution, and do what I can. And I do think that I've woken up to, even like good, well-meaning people can be, really far off the mark with what this issue is here. Yeah. And so there needs to really be a willingness from those people to admit they're wrong. And I think that's probably what white people find the hardest is to start to make that change. They have to admit that they've got it wrong forever. And I think that's where the defensiveness comes, and the lack of want to do that self-reflection, because it's uncomfortable, and they don't want, it's very easy to turn your cheek and not have to deal with the uncomfortableness of it all. Yeah. While the victims of this can't do that. And so they face it every single day. And that moves into the conversation of privilege, doesn't it? And what that means. So
on privilege, and I think this is a moment to say there's a lot we don't know, right?
Yeah.
And we have to, and we have to learn. But what is your understanding of white privilege?
Yeah. And my understanding of white privilege as I know it today is that being white, I'm trying to put this as simply as I can, being white gives me a head start over people that aren't white, right? Certainly in the society that I live in. It's not about saying that I'm automatically going to have a better life. So some of the conversations, not this week, but in the past that I've had when I talk about my white privilege, is people go, you want to come and see my life, mate? You think I've had a privileged life, yeah? So someone like me says, I grew up with an alcoholic father. They split up when I was young. I see all that. And you think I'm privileged just because I'm white? So there's that lack of understanding there in it. And so white privilege, I want to try and answer your question. White privilege to me, in short, is that kind of, I have a head start. I have a certain amount of privilege just because of the color of my skin.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it, and I think what is really hard for people to understand is actually how deep rooted this is, how far back it goes, how deeply woven into society it is, so that it's just invisible, right? So and that's why the majority don't get to see it, and they don't really think about it. and because it's just so deeply woven into fabric, right? But actually, it is something that is really complex, and I'm not going to try and kind of explain what it is, because I'm still learning myself. But it is a connection of the fact that your starting points have always been different, right? The starting points have always been different. That's the first thing. And then what happens is if you have all of the things like education and university and health and job opportunities afforded to you before, in terms of your head start, you're always playing catch up. And then if you're playing catch up, you're always going to be perpetually in kind of, caught in a class situation, and you're going to be caught in a lack of opportunity situation. And then what you've got is the perpetual problem, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You then have, and then you have kind of overt and explicit, and then you have underlying and implicit, and anything from not being able to break free of certain neighborhoods, always being caught in kind of the similar trap where you don't feel like you've got opportunities. The kind of the ratio of being able to get to university, from if you're a white person versus if you're not, it is much higher. Doors being opened, membership to clubs, it goes on and on and on. But and so where you get is, if you look and it feels unattainable and unreachable, because it actually is, then what happens is you turn back into what you know, and you think, and that's going to be something that just kind of goes round and round and round. For example, let me ask you a question. When was the last time before you went to a town in the UK you thought about how the color of your skin would affect the way you'd be treated in that town?
Never. Never even entered my skin colors never entered my mind.
I think about that all the time. So if I go to certain places in certain parts of the country, I will be thinking, what's that going to be like? Because I've got a mixed family, and what's that going to be like? When I was younger, I'd be like, am I going to be safe? Right. If I go to this place, when you sit in a pub, do you feel like you're the odd one out ever?
No.
I mean, maybe you do now a little bit for different reasons, because you're not having a drink, but but yeah, like, I've sat in when I was in corporate life, I've sat in meetings, and I'm the only one, and you're conscious of it. And then you get like little, you get little comments that, like, like if you go out for dinner and you go for an Indian, and people go to you, oh, what's good? Like,
Yeah.
how do I know?
Yeah.
I don't eat this stuff at home. So, and it's not, there's no malice. It's just woven. You just go like, it's woven in. And I mean, those are some very almost light-hearted anecdotal, but it's just, we just live with it. You just live with it. And I realized that actually what happens is you just try and you get so used to it that you just try and get on with it. And then when you get on with it, you stop even realizing it's there sometimes. And that's been my experience, like as in I just think, okay, well, I've done all right. I've been successful, but it's there. Now, there is, I'm very conscious of something, and it sort of came up in a conversation with a mate yesterday. There are lots of people who are white that just don't get it. They're like, yeah, well, it's hard for everyone, and I've had this particular experience, and, that's the reverse of that, and that's a really difficult thing to help people understand. It's a very difficult thing to help people understand that one person's experience is not the same as the experience of everyone else on the other side. So the exception should not overrule the norm. And it's very difficult, you know. There's a video that's going around at the moment, and it's been around for a while, where I don't know if you've seen it, but there's like a coach.
Yeah,
and he's got
and he gives them all a head start. Yeah.
Yeah, he gives. So basically, yeah, he gives them a hit. So he says, right, we're going to race to the end, and you're going to win $100. But before we do that, I'm going to read out a bunch of statements. He reads out a bunch of statements. That's, you know, stuff like, you know, take a step forward if you never had to worry about putting food on the table. If you never had. So clearly, what happens is, a bunch of white kids move forward, and a bunch of the black kids, are sort of left behind. And so it's a very clear picture that the majority, it's a majority. But then I had a conversation with a friend yesterday who said that in conversations that he was having with some friends were like saying, well, actually, you can look at that and you can see that actually there were 6. I don't know how many numbers, but there were like 6. 3 of those 6 were white kids were at the back as well, and that's the thing you're trying to fight against, which is, of course, there are going to be exceptions. You had a very, very difficult, challenging life, right? There was abuse, there was addiction, there was poverty, there was there's all those sorts of things that you had to deal with, right? So you didn't have an easy life. So you could be forgiven for saying, well, hang on, my life's been difficult. So I don't know, I think one of the biggest challenges is you're not going to try and convert that extreme side. It's about trying to help the people that don't know, but that still are leaning back a little bit.
Let me tell you one of the differences that's just come into my head in what you've said there. So all the things that I experienced and I went through, and that, let's say, put me further back in my, in that race, or my starting point. All of those things, if I feel ready to, as an adult, I can deal with. Now, I believe in compassion and have a community and, all of that kind of stuff. But let's say at the real core, they are all things I can take and I can do something with. So the poverty, I can try and earn money and become rich, right? The abuse, I can go to therapy and work through and become, emerge the other side stronger. All of those things, that all of them, I have the ability to change and to work through and become something different. You don't have that with the color of your skin. You can't, like poverty, you can't just get rich and then it goes away. You still got the color of your skin. So this color of your skin is completely out of your control and not something that you can change. So there's one difference in it. Yeah. And I guess, that's the big difference, because then you can start taking that into all the different complexities of it. And if you morphed me and made the same version of me and made me as a black person, that black person in today's world right now would have more of a difficulty, or would be at more of a disadvantage going into the organizations that I'm going into and saying, here I am now, I've worked through this and this is who I am today. So as a black person, that would be more difficult. I think I would have to, there would be more for me to prove.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you really clean? Are you sure you're not going to relapse?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And by the way, let's take that one step further. I saw you hanging about with a load of black lads yesterday. If I was black, he was hanging about with a load of black lads yesterday, right? I'll be straight with you. There's a lot of people in art that either consciously or subconsciously, that would be a red flag. Nobody would say to me as a white man, saw you hanging about with a load of white people though. Yeah. Right? And that's not even that extreme. Yeah. And as I say it sounds sickening. Yeah. It sounds sickening that somebody would say you're hanging about with a load of black lads, right? But you don't have to scratch the surface to see that going on in our world, by the way.
Yeah. And the reason I wanted to talk about it is because I think you could approach the argument like, well, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And then what happens is I think people get the defenses up. And I think it's important to help people understand why this is real, you know, and help them see what's in front of them, you know,
Mm,
and that has to be done through conversation, through bringing people in. They have to do the work as well. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's not about spoon feeding like that, you know, but I think that there has to be a, a, a space to have a conversation about it. The other thing that I came across yesterday was the notion that children are the adultification of black children, black boys in particular, actually,
right.
and the notion of being that you look at a 10-year-old black boy differently than you do look at a 10-year-old white boy. So let's
Mm,
give an example. Like if a, you know, like if a 10-year-old white boy is running around, he's mischievous, he might be like boisterous, he might like bump into somebody. You just kind of, you say, oh, he's got, he's got high energy, all that sort of
mm,
stuff, right? I don't want to oversimplify it, but then the way that, particularly in America, the system looks at 10-year-old boys who are black is very different. They start to
mm,
kind of, adultify them, right? So there's aggression there. There's, you're treated differently. If you might be looked at as a menace or a threat, or and it's just a really truth, a significant truth that they are just pulled into, the system of being viewed as an adult much earlier
mm.
than their white counterparts. What do you think of that?
I think it's something that I would never have thought about before, but it's one of those things that as soon as you started saying it, felt very clear to me. It was like, yeah, I probably do that myself. But not intentionally or consciously, but that's one of them biases that's probably ingrained in
Unconscious.
unconscious in white people. Yeah, it is, because as soon as you said it, it's like, wow. And that's one of, I heard a guy called Reg, I forget his surname, but I saw him speak like 2 years ago. And when I sat down ready to listen to him, right, it was Black History Month, and I was there talking about mental health, and he was talking about racism and bias, right? And at that stage, we're only going back 2 years, I didn't really know what bias was. I hadn't really heard the term. And I sat there thinking, it'd be nice to listen to this lad, but like, I'm definitely not racist, so I'm not going to learn anything. And fucking hell, when he finished, I was like, shit, I have got work to do with some of the stuff that he opened my mind to. And so, I think one of the biggest responsibilities of white people is to have the courage to admit those moments. Like then, when you just said that, I have to go, fuck, like I have to go, shit, I probably do that. I probably do that. If I really want to be a part of the solution, I've got to do that. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying with that?
Yeah, definitely. Look, I also, genuinely, I have to believe this because this is just who I am in the world, but I just genuinely believe that the majority of people in the world are good
Mm,
people,
yeah.
good-hearted, kind, well-meaning, good-natured. I think I'm hoping that whatever's happening in the world is causing people to sit up and realize, should it have happened much sooner? Yes, for sure. But it's happening now. And it's about making sure that the conversations happen. And before you get to solution, you need to have understanding.
Mm,
And understanding means having conversations. It's about pushing people to go on their own journey, because you can't, you can't suddenly become the providers of, of all the information that's out there. But
mm,
then being ready to have conversations and being ready to answer things that, that aren't clear. if they've gone on their own journey, if there's like a thing that's a lack of clarity or a lack of understanding. So I think that's really important that we kind of, we do that. And I think between us, we've got this platform, and we've got, the work that we do. And then on top of that, I'm gonna keep us talking about this. And crucially, it's about doing things differently as well, just to help make a difference. And why do I care so much is a sort of a question that was sort of posed to me, not in an aggressive way. It was just like, and I think obvious reasons, I realize that I've been kind of living through some of this myself, because of the color of my skin. But actually it's about the future for my children and all children. It's about what future gets created. And if we look back on this moment and we go, we didn't take this moment where the whole world is paying attention to it. If we don't do something about it now, then you've kind of missed a big opportunity to drive change. It's going to take time, and actually, there's so much that won't be changed, for generations. But you got to start, and that's why I feel really passionately about it.
Yeah, no, and listen, I stand with you on that, and it's that, why, I guess I'll pose myself the same question, right? Why do I care so much about it? And I care so much about it for a number of reasons, I guess. One, because I believe in what's right. I believe, I consider myself to be somebody who educates and has a voice, however big that voice is, right? And so I believe in trying to do the right thing with that voice. And because, I've been woken up to how wrong I've got it. And from a personal perspective, I'm always trying to work at becoming a better version of myself. And I've been so wide of the mark on this in my life that I want to even that up, I guess.
Okay. 8 minutes 46 seconds.
Right.
What does that mean to you?
8 minutes 46 seconds. Should it mean something to me then?
Well, I mean, not necessarily, but that was how long George was pleading for his life.
Wow.
Under the knee of that police officer.
Wow.
He was known as Gentle Giant.
Yeah, I read that.
6'6", former sort of all-star football player, went to the state championships, Texan, family man, had a job, but basically, in the lockdown, lost it, just trying like everyone else. He was alleged to have used the counterfeit 20 to buy some cigarettes.
Yeah.
And he was, by all accounts, I've read what I've read, but, probably very, probably pissed off at what was happening, but he was put onto the floor, and he had the knee on his neck, couldn't breathe. He pleaded. He said, I can't breathe. They were talking to him. They were asking, well, we just want you to get in the car. He said, I'll get in the car. He said, I will get in the car. And then they carried on. And a man just lost his life for no reason, and he was begging. So I want to ask you, what the fuck has happened to humanity?
Fuck, man. Well, I guess the place to start is that it's not something that's just happened. It's not. That's not a new phenomenon, is it?
No.
Right? It's not. And that's the problem. Is that it's not new. This isn't a new isolated incident, right? That kind of epitomizes where we've been heading as a as a society in the way that we've allowed this to happen. This has been allowed to happen. It's a failing, and it has to change. And that's why we're committed to doing what we do. There was part of me that was thinking, I don't want to talk about this because I don't know what to fucking say, right? But this is more about saying, well, I got to do something, right? I got to try and be part of the solution, however that looks. And some of the things that you're starting to see that's been born out of it, I hope, like you say, this is the moment. This is the moment in history. How the fuck do we want to be remembered, by the way? How do we want to be remembered as a society? Because at the moment, we're going to be remembered as like the fucking asshole of history. Yeah. And so what do we want to do with this? And I've seen, you're seeing that uprising, and I hope that it happens.
Yeah. I'm just, I guess, yeah, it's not new. And, as I think Will Smith said, it's not new. It's just getting filmed now.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. And actually thankfully that, that it is being documented, because before that it was just easily plausible deniability. So at least that's kind of driving something. I say thankfully, not because, it should be, I'm not thankful it's happening. I'm glad that it's going to be leading to outcomes. But I guess 8 minutes, 46 seconds, that's a long time. It's a long time to be hearing somebody die under your knee. Like, clearly that guy was an evil bastard, right? To do that. But what could have been going through his mind when that was going on? And what wires are missing, And I think he's just one of many that exist out there, right? And so, yeah, look, I mean, I know that this is this is a somber episode, right? And we are usually generally very optimistic and upbeat. And I do feel optimistic about humanity, right? I do feel optimistic about what is possible, and that's why we do what we do. But we have to really understand what we're working with, and where we have to start from. And so I think we understand that that there are places in society that there's just that are unreachable, right? So we can either try and go and convert and fix those, or we lean in to kind of the headwind and go with momentum and the positive force to drive change. So as Michelle Obama said when she used to get bashed by the Republicans, I may have mentioned this on our podcast before, but when they go low, we go high. So actually, I think that says to me, let's deal with the highest common denominator, not the lowest common denominator. Let's not try and fix those laggards, the unfixables. Let's work with the people who can drive the change. But it was really powerful. It's a super powerful. I even thought about being silent for 8 minutes and 46 seconds on this podcast, and given that we only do an hour, that would have been very impactful. But I think it's more important for us to be talking and moving the conversation on.
Yeah, 100%.
Gentle giant. What a shame. What a waste of life. So we normally do reasons to be cheerful at the end of each of our shows, and it just doesn't feel right.
No.
This week. There are small glimmers of reasons to be optimistic, but cheerful this week. I'm not feeling very cheery. So I guess my question would be two parts, right? And what's one thing you're going to do differently as a result of our conversation now? Yeah. And I realize I'm putting you on the spot. And, one thing you're hopeful for.
One thing that I'm going to do differently as a result of this conversation and everything that's come out of it is commit to listening and educating myself, right, more and more, and challenge myself to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So that's what I hope to do differently. And what was the second question?
What are you hopeful for?
And
as a result of what's going on in the world right now, what are you hopeful for?
And I'm hopeful that this is the beginning of change. I'm hopeful for people like yourself, I'm hopeful that this is the beginning to move towards one day somebody like you doesn't have to sit in a pub and be worried about what their skin color means. Somebody like you doesn't have to worry when they're going to a certain part of the country whether their skin color is going to come into play. I think we've got a long way to go to get there, but I hope this is the real beginning of a surge towards that rather than a distant dream.
Cool. So what I'm gonna do as a result of this is, firstly I'm going to start. I've got a big list of things I want to, start to educate myself with. But I'm gonna start reading a couple of the books that keep showing up as kind of, a space for education. Secondly, it's not a surprise to anyone that, that regularly listens to us that, race is something we talk about a fair bit. And I was conscious, and you and I have talked about, how much we bring that into the space. And my commitment is we'll bring it in as much as we need to. And we may lose some people as a result of it, but we will gain a bunch of others as well. So, it's just to say that we're not afraid to have the conversations that, commitment to not being afraid to have the conversations that we need to. And then what I'm hopeful for, I hope for what you hope for, and there's a long journey. I'm hopeful for action. I'm hopeful for people talking the talk and then doing something different. I'm hopeful for people that I know taking what they're feeling right now and doing something meaningful and different. And then I'm hopeful for change, and I'm hopeful for this conversation being kept alive continuously. I'm just going to end it on and today on one thing. In our work, me and Chris are often known for pulling out quotes, and this, right? We think that quotes, metaphors, they're really good for helping kind of ground stuff in like real challenges. And one that we use a lot is from Socrates, and I know I've mentioned this one on the podcast in the early ones. The secret of change is not on fighting the old, but on creating the new. So it's not in any way to say that we should not be focused on the hundreds of years of race relations issues and challenges and history and evidence. It's not to say that. It's to say that actually where lots of organizations and leaders are chastising themselves, are feeling shame or guilt or remorse for not having done enough up to now, you're better off channeling that energy in driving change for the future. So the secret of change is not on fighting the old, but on creating the new.
Love that. I love that. And what a way to end the episode.
Thanks for having the conversation today, man. It was it's something that is really heavy on our minds across the world. So I felt like we needed to talk about it.
Yeah, and I'm glad we have. And yeah, I hope it's been of use.
Speak soon.